what's been happening the last few weeks is we've been looking at different characters in the Christmas story and looking at them through a little bit different of a lens. And so we're going to look at Joseph today. But before we get there, I want to play a little game that's going to kind of help us get into the idea of where we're going and what kind of different perspective. And I'm going to need your participation. So I'm going to put something up and you're going to tell me what goes with this. It's a very popular statement. So here we go. Practice makes... Good job. When life gives you lemons... Good job. Fortune favors the bold. That one's not as, not everybody's on that one. Okay. Time is, oh, that's funny. Time is precious. Time is fleeting. I thought time is money. Okay. Knowledge is power. And then this is the one we're going to land on today. Actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. So before we get into Joseph, I want to tell you one of my favorite stories, and it's going to sound a little bad that it's one of my favorite stories, but it's really funny, from when I was growing up and Christmas Eve service. So if you've been with us a long time, you might have heard this story, but I don't think we've told it in a long time. But I grew up in Southern Illinois in a little bitty church. And I grew up in the 80s. And the only way that you had Christmas Eve service in the 80s was candlelit. That's the only way you did it, okay? And in the 80s, there was something really particular about hair. It was large, okay? And not only was it large, it was hard. So like if you touch somebody's hair, it didn't move, or your finger would get caught in it, right? And this is important to the story because at Christmas Eve, everyone came to church. So everybody's family was in from out of town, and you would all go to church, but the church was small. So you would literally be standing like this with your candle. And I don't know who came up with the rules. Again, it was the 80s. There weren't many rules. And it was give everybody a candle no matter their age. Okay? So you can kind of see where we're going if you can put two and two together. So you start out with the candle in the front, and they would light it, and you would watch it go back and forth between the pews. It was like this magical moment, right? And this is happening until we hear, ah! And you turn around, and in a split second, I take too long to explain how fast this all occurred, but in a split second, you see a whoo. And it's a little girl that's about the age of 7 that has aqua-netted her hair. And her brother wonderfully has taken the candle to her hair, and it went woof. And in the same amount of time that someone went, ah, and it went woof, somebody else, and I'm pretty sure it was the dad, took his suit coat off and put it over her head. And it was over. That was it, right? The hair caught on fire. It went out. Actions speak louder than words. There are times that really quick action is needed. But I don't know about you, but I find that there are two types of people in the world. And both seem to struggle with this. And that is, there are overthinkers in the world, right? You know you're one if I'm saying this. And a problem occurs, a fire occurs in your life. And you're thinking, that's a fire. How am I going to put out the fire? Well, she could put out the fire. He should have put out the fire. Well, maybe I should put out the fire. Right? We overthink the fires in our life so much so that we've thought about the fire for so long that either the fire has engulfed everything else or it's already put itself out, but we've done nothing but think. There are people like that. Then there are people like me, okay? And we're not like acting right, we're just reacting, right? Like, so I don't ever think, I just act. You know, there's a fire, I run. There's a fire, I knock you down. You know, I'm not the person taking my suit coat off. I'm the person like probably dousing your head in the baptistry. I don't think well, right? And I think that when we look at life, most of us, if we're honest, can say that when fires occur in our life, we lean one of the two ways. We either are a reactor and we do things we really wish we wouldn't have done. Oh, we just thought it through 85 different ways and we didn't do anything. And so today we're going to look at somebody in the Christmas story that had a different perspective. That his actions did speak louder than words, and they weren't reactions. They were actions based on a life of character of following God. And I think we want to be that person. We want to be able to not react, but act appropriately. We want to be the person that doesn't overthink and question everything. But we look for, how do you balance that with all of the information that life throws at us? So we're going to be in Matthew 1 today, and we're going to be looking at Joseph in the Christmas story. And we're going to start out in Matthew 1, verse 18. And it said, "This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother, Mary, was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit." Now, let's talk about this for a second. Pledged meant most likely in that day, there had been money exchanged. There was a price. And Joseph was going to get her as his wife, but she was still living with her parents, okay? Before they came together, it means exactly what you're thinking, okay? And obviously, you could see that Joseph's a little ticked. This was not his plan. We're going to find this out, but he'd been a godly man. He'd done everything right, and his plan just got axed. Ever been there? You've done the right things, you're the rule follower, and plans don't work out. So you would think, what's Joseph going to do? So we see, because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. So I want to spend just a little bit of time here. Because her husband Joseph was faithful to the law, and yet Joseph found himself between a rock and a hard place. Have you ever been in a place where there's no clear right or wrong direction to go? Have you ever said to yourself, I wish God would just open up the heavens and say, do this right now? Because even though I want to be faithful, I don't have a clear path. That's where Joseph found himself. He had the right knowledge. He'd been faithful to the law, but now was the time to put in the action of wisdom. What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Wisdom is knowing when to do the right thing and what the right thing is. And where do we get wisdom? We get it from an experience of a relationship with God. And so even though by law, Joseph could have just outed Mary and divorced her publicly, he didn't. It says, but after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. So we need to stop here for a couple things. If you were with us a couple weeks ago when Nick was talking about Zechariah, and he was like, look, You think you want to see an angel, you don't. All right? They're scary. They're big. Every time they're described, it's do not be afraid. They're big men, strong, powerful. And so it says, but after Joseph chose the hard thing, after Joseph didn't out her and didn't go with his emotion and didn't wallow in the plans that weren't going to happen. But after that, God shows up. So then it goes on and it says, she will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. I want to stop here for just a moment and speak to anybody that's in this crowd that came in here because you got drug here. Okay? You're here because it's Christmas time and that's the time to go to church. And so you're in the audience and you're not even really sure if you believe in this whole thing. Who is this Jesus person? Why are we doing all of this? This next few minutes is for you. And I'd like you to just set aside everything you think and just consider a few of these questions. So the angel is telling Joseph that the baby inside Mary's womb already knows his purpose. That baby knows that he's here for his people and for their sins. And that equates to the angel is telling Joseph, Jesus is here for you and for all you've messed up. And Joseph knew how important it is. And I would like to ask anybody who's here that's not quite sure if that baby really would make a difference to just keep that thought and think about what that could mean if there was somebody that came into your life and said, everything you've messed up, it's okay. There's a plan for you. So it says, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So again, for those of you that aren't quite sure, you know who Jesus is. I just want to say how random this is. There's a bunch of Jews that believe in the law, and about 1,000 years before the angel is talking to Joseph, a man writes down that the person that God's going to send is going to be born to a virgin. That's kind of hard to make happen if you're not God. And you can see this is from Isaiah 7:14. Here's what it really says. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. This is what the angel is talking about. You remember that, Joseph? And Joseph, a man who has studied the law his whole life, is like, I do remember that. He knew what was happening. And for those of you that don't know, I want to sum up the Bible in about 60 seconds. It's finally happening. When God created the earth and when he created Adam and Eve, he was like, you are my people. I have been waiting to have a relationship with my people. And he has it for a little bit with Adam and Eve, and it's awesome, and they screw it up. And so he's like, that's okay. Okay, Abraham, here we go. And he says, I'm going to put a tent with my people. And you guys can come and you can be a little bit close to me, and that wasn't enough. And I'm going to give a nation to my people, the Jews, and to Israel. And you guys build a temple. And I'll be in the temple. But the whole time there was a plan coming. And finally he says it to Joseph. You're going to name him Jesus, and it means God with us. And finally, after all this time since the garden, I'm going to be with you. Okay, so now back to our story of Joseph. So when Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord commanded him, and he took Mary home as his wife immediately. Good thing it was Joseph, not me. I'd wake up and be like, are you kidding me? I mean, it was a dream. Was it real? I'd be second guessing. I'd be asking my friends. I'd be wondering, like, can I get some information from my rabbi? Do you think this is the right thing to do? But if we're going to learn anything from Joseph, it's how do you know when to take correct action immediately? And it comes from a life of surrender. Actions speak louder than words, the right actions. And the right actions are always out of surrender. So let's look at what Joseph has surrendered. The first thing he surrendered were his emotions. Do you know feelings aren't true? Can you think of any time that you leaned into your feelings and you really wish you wouldn't have? So if you've ever listened to me talk, you know that my number one feeling is anger. And if I lean into that, I do some things that aren't healthy. Some of you, your number one emotion might be fear. When you lean into that, we do things to make ourselves feel protected, don't we? Do you ever feel like somebody wronged you, like it wasn't fair, like they should get theirs? We know the correct action to take when the first thing we do is surrender our feelings to God and say, okay, I'm going to give you my feelings, and I'm not going to act on them. And then, after he did that, after he didn't out Mary, he surrendered his own desires. He wanted his own family. He didn't want to raise another kid that wasn't his family. He surrendered that. And don't you think that when an angel comes to you and tells you what you've got to do, that you kind of give up? Have you ever been there? Where like you had an idea, you surrendered that. You made a new plan, okay, that didn't work. Have you ever been to the place where it's like, all right, God, you win? And we think we're being dismissive. We think we're like, fine. But that's where God wants us. And Joseph had already lived a life to the place that he was in surrender, that when the angel came, he was like, great. And so then it goes on and it says, he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. What I love about that one verse is, he stayed obedient. So it's one thing when we have a fire and we go, what do we do? What do we do? And then we do something right, and then dang it. We have to wake up the next day and do good things over again. Wasn't that enough? Like, wasn't that part of my life enough? So life goes on. And we're in chapter 1, and I'm going to take you to chapter 2. But before I do, I need to tell you a little bit about the Christmas story and ruin your nativity sets. Okay? So, we know that after this, Mary gives birth in like a kind of barn area, and they lay Jesus in a manger, and that part of your nativity set is correct. Okay? Now, the next part that we see in the next few verses is that there's a star. That's correct, if you have a star, all right? And then we see that the shepherds saw the star. We don't know if the shepherds made it to Jesus, what day they made it to Jesus, how long it took them to get to Jesus. So if you have in your nativity set Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus, and the shepherds, you might want to move them over a little, okay? Now, the part that we really don't quite have right is the wise men, the magi. So we know that when Jesus was born, a star appeared. And this is so cool. I geek out on history, but if you read about astronomy from that day, this was like a major news event. Like, what is going on? And the Magi recognize a king has been born. So they start traveling. Now, theologians say it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 years that this migration happened. But at some point, so if you got your wise men right there by Jesus, you need to move them to the other part of the room, okay? Because they don't belong right there in the nativity set. All right, so they're traveling, and they come to King Herod, and they say, this is so great. A king was born. And Herod's like, say what? Because he doesn't want his throne to be overtaken. So he sends out a decree and says, kill all the baby boys. Because I don't know which one of them thinks they're going to be king, but it's not going to be one in my country. And that's where we pick up this story again. And so it says, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said. Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child and kill him. Joseph does this. But I want to pause between here and the next verse. This wasn't 2020. There was no Joseph, get on Zoom and do your job from there. Do you recognize what it took for a man in that day and age to move a family? God was asking him to trust him with providing for his family, for the safety of the voyage, knowing that people were out to kill a baby. And he just got up and went. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Another prophecy was fulfilled. And then in verse 19, it says, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph. Don't you think by now he's like, okay, what? I'm not scared anymore, and this is the story of my life. I think I've got things settled. I mean, can you imagine, especially the men in the room? I want you to think about this. Somebody comes to you and says, your family is in danger. You've got to go now. And so you move to a completely different country. You set up a completely new life. You find a way to provide for your family. You guys finally are starting to have friends. People are like, oh, you're marrying Jesus from wherever, you know? And they're like, yes. These are real people. These are real lives. And then the angel shows up again and says, get up. Take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. For those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. What do you think Joseph did? I mean, we know the story. What would you do? No, thank you. If he's dead and they're not out to kill me, I think I'll stay here. Why do I have to go somewhere else? I've done everything you've asked of me. But he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. Actions speak louder than words. Every time. Joseph didn't react and he didn't overthink, but he had the correct action. How? How do we find a man like that? How do we become a person like that? And it goes back to that whole question, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? We can know the right things. Even if you're not a Jesus follower, you know morally, don't lie, don't cheat, don't gossip. We have the knowledge. It's the wisdom. It's the putting the knowledge into practice at the correct time. And how do we become that kind of person? And the answer is, according to Joseph, time spent with God. We look back at the beginning of the story. He was a man who knew the law. He spent time with the Lord. So as we get to our takeaways today, I have one for the people that got drug here. Okay? You don't know if you even think you believe in this whole Christmas story. What in the world? We're talking about a baby in a manger that came to save the world. How believable is that? If you find yourself ever thinking those thoughts, I'd ask you to take a step towards obedience and surrender. And by taking a step, here are the questions I would ask you to ask yourself. Why is it that we're ending 2021 and going into 2022? Why is it called 2022? Why isn't it called 6022 or 8022? Why aren't we calling it what it is, the time since time began? Why is everything based on when a baby was born? Could it be that that baby was more than man? Why is it that every movie that we watch, every TV show that we watch, is about good triumphing over evil? Why is it that even though we know we drift towards bad choices, we'd rather be lazy than work, we'd rather watch TV than work out, we'd rather eat sugar than eat vegetables, why is it that inside of us there is a deep down longing for good, even though bad is easier? Could it be that there's a God that wants a relationship with you, that sent a son for you? If you're here and you got drug here, I just ask you to open your heart and think about the questions. Why does life work like that? And if you're a Jesus follower, if you say that you know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, then I would ask you to take a step towards obedience and surrender. And you know what that looks like? Don't stop. It's hard. Do you ever just get tired of making good choices? Do you just ever get tired thinking, when is life gonna get easier? I made this decision for Jesus. When does it get easier? And I would encourage you to take the step that Joseph did, which just is obedience after obedience after obedience. There's a scripture in Galatians 6:9 that says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." I'm sure when Joseph moved his family a third time out of Egypt and back to Israel, he thought, you've got to be kidding me. But look at the harvest. What will you harvest by not giving up?